The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Welcome back, everyone. Nathan Romas with you here. This week is the conclusion to my chat with co-host John Simpson and our guest Mark Grdovic. We pick up from the part of his story with the Ugly Baby Infill mission, as it was named, and we continue talking about just one story from the 10th Special Forces Group and Mark's experiences in Iraq, also the taking of the city of Kirkuk and the fallout.
As I was saying, the morning after, as the sun came up after the Ugly Baby Infill was complete, we now had 14 of our 15 ODAs in position. And when I talk about ODAs, I should clarify that's the term we use. It's Operational Detachment Alpha. That's what we call a Special Forces team. A team is 12 men. In Special Forces, there's an Operational Detachment Bravo, which is the company headquarters, and an Operational Detachment Charlie, which is the battalion headquarters. That's a term we use for when they're in a tactical formation, when they're acting tactically. But so you'll hear the term ODA that's a Special Forces team. So as I mentioned, the teams are now.
But if I could add just for the civilian listeners, so when he says ODA, it's not like a rifle squad or a platoon or anything else. It's 12 guys that train and work together. It's it's commanded by a captain. He has a special operations team technician who's a warrant officer. Then he has and these are the ideal ranks. He has a master sergeant who's the operations sergeant. Sergeant first class, who's the intelligence sergeant, and then the rest of the MOSs are paired so that you have 2 weapons guys or 18 Bravos. You have 2 engineer sergeants who are like 18 Charlies, 2 medical sergeants who are 18 Deltas, and 2 communications sergeants who are 18 Echoes. And you'll notice that they can either deploy as a 12-man element, or you can split it right down the middle and have 2 6-man half teams.
Oh, okay, I see.
So that's it's not like any other, and it's not designed to function as a rifle squad. But as you can see with what Mark has covered and what he's going to be covering, this is, basically this is an organization for, organizing, training, and advising a guerrilla force, in occupied territory.
Okay.
So that's what he means when he says ODA.
And we're at about March of 2003
Yes.
in the book. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great point that what John said too is this structure is unique within the American Special Operations community. Like the Special Forces community are the only ones that have guys with different occupational specialties. Where in other organizations everybody goes through the exact training, where we go through the same training, but then we have guys break off into specialties, and those specialties were selected to make this organization semi-independent or self-sufficient in denied territory where there's not an American infrastructure to support them. And it worked. It works very well, frankly. But so going back to the original point, the teams are now going through their own experience of meeting their guerrilla counterpart, starting to kind of, build a relationship and outline what they think they can bring to the table. So if you can picture, 2/3 of my teams are now sitting on the front line staring at the Iraqi forces, and 1/3 of my teams are now headed to the area I called Halabja, which is along the Iranian border, and they have the mission to link up with the Kurdish entities that are preparing to conduct the attack against Ansar Islam. So the timing of this is interesting again, where I am very excited that everybody survived their infill. I'm very excited that I pushed everybody forward and they're all dispersed. And while I do talk about this as, a decisive point that we're we're in a much better position. It would be hard for Saddam to stop us. We still have a lot to do, meaning I have to defeat, like I could jokingly say, all I got to do now is just, conduct this uphill frontal attack in the mountains to defeat this extremist, Islamic movement, and then we're good to go. So we sent those guys out there. They linked up with their Kurdish commanders. And I will tell you, this is, for me, one of the most interesting parts of the entire story, because to see, I've had people say to me, do you really think the Kurds had 10,000 guys there in that fight? Not a question in my mind. Absolutely. Like the way the terrain was and where we were in Halabja, I can see all 10,000 of them. Like I would get on the roof of the building, maybe a 2-story building, and I can see hundreds of small campfires at night. So we joked about it, that it looked like Woodstock. Like the Kurds are sending people here and they can't sustain this. Like the local community can't sustain it with these guys are, getting food, water, just camping out, waiting for this attack. So the great question comes, like, when are we going to conduct this attack? What do we need to do to prepare for it? And we're frustrated because we're still not getting the amount of close air support that we had anticipated. We really wanted to bomb this location pretty heavily for about a week before we try to conduct the assault. And we also wanted to outfit the Kurds with ammunition and weapons that they were short on supply. We also did a couple other weird things where we brought some equipment that we knew was unique that would help them out. Like minefields are a big deal. We were very concerned about minefields. So we looked into the Army inventory and we found at the time a piece of equipment that was brand new called APOBs, which is basically like a gigantic rope of explosives that you can just, it's 2 backpacks that you click together, then you aim it and you fire it and it fires the rope. The Army's had this for years on a truck, for armored units. This is a dismounted version of it. It fires this line charge, the rope, I'm going to call it a rope, lands on the ground and then detonates. And it blows about a 1 to 2 foot corridor through a minefield. We brought 11 of those, and we live fire demonstrated one to the Kurds and say, this is how we're going to handle the minefields. We brought CS grenades for caves. We brought rocket launchers for bunkers, things like that. And we also brought literally the first generation of UAVs, which were literally brand new at that time.
One thing that might be worth pointing out too is, so these guys, like, what are they working with?
Yeah.
Like, they just got like basic cell phones and a radio before you show up. So it's like, that must speak to how good their commanders are to keep track of 10,000 people.
Their commanders, and I think John hinted at a version of this, their commanders command by their competence. They are in these positions because they have survived this long, and they are in this position because they're good. This is not something like, well, he's my cousin, so I gave him a unit. There's a little bit of that, but like these guys, particularly these guys in this attack, they're the best they have. And like they rule because everyone agrees they're the commander. It's not like it's very different than the American military, so to speak. The average guy has an AK-47 and probably has between 2 and 4 magazines of ammunition. They don't have, they certainly don't have body armor. They don't have things like canteens and stuff like that. Like they literally just have like, it's your rifle and 2 to 4 magazines of ammunition.
And we're going to take over the world with that. You're like, wow, you guys are brave.
So this is what we're facing. Like I said, they're like, hey, we're moving out. We're doing this attack with what we've got. And there's, again, that awkwardness of, hey, we made all these promises and we haven't come through. One of the, you can call it a promise, but part of our plan was we were going to have this week of bombing that I said. The week was going to start out with a cruise missile strike. And it did turn out to be 64 cruise missiles, which is amazing that we were allocated 64 cruise missiles for this attack. Particularly given what's going on with the U.S. military and the invasion that's about to start. That's a significant allocation coming off Navy ships. I want to say it was the 21st of March. We decided it's now or never. Like we've got to go. It's not what we wanted, but if we wait any longer, we're going to miss this window, and we're going to execute this perfectly, but too late to be of value. So we had to go now. So we made the decision. And I should point out, to put this in better chronology, when I say we made the decision, this is the night before the ugly baby infill. And it's important to put that into context. So we decided, let's take the cruise missiles, because we think we're going to lose them if we don't use them in the next few days. So Tobo goes down to Halabja, is literally standing on the roof of the building that we got rocketed in, where the rocket ripped through the side. And he's there to observe the cruise missile strike. I'll admit on our own part, we were a little bit naive at that point. I hadn't seen a cruise missile strike, so I didn't know what it was going to look like. And I think we thought it was going to be more dramatic and big. And we didn't realize, we're still pretty far away from where these missiles are hitting. So, and we're telling the Kurds, they're going to strike in 10 seconds. And there's a countdown and everyone's checking, and then you hear nothing. And then you realize, you hear something off in the distance, oh. Now, they were thrilled because they still knew, the missile struck in the mountains, but they were probably striking 10 to 15 miles away. But I think we still thought we would see more of it, or, the missiles did not strike where we asked them to strike. Now, I say that
all right.
Loosely, they kind of, they sort of all struck the enemy area, but we kept explaining, we need you to strike here, 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 and here. And somebody way above us in the chain kept directing, we're going to launch 30 of those at that chemical site. We're there's no need to launch 30 of the 60 cruise missiles at the chemical site. When I say the chemical site, it's like a 1-story, 4-room building, made of cinder blocks. It's not some fortress.
Oh, okay.
But again, we didn't get exactly what we wanted, but we were happy to get what we got. I should point out, this is that night was Colonel Tobo's birthday, which the Kurds interpreted as a good omen. They like that. And we had also had a problem throughout the day going back and forth with the higher headquarters. Where are the missiles striking? We had submitted target lists up, and we'd get a different list back. And it wasn't the list that I said. There was one time we deciphered the list, if you will, and we're like, hey, that's the PUK headquarters. Like somebody somewhere is picking a target on a map. It's the PUK headquarters. You can't. So that when I say Tobo was standing on the roof of the building, he's standing on the roof of that building with his Blue Force tracker, praying to God that we are going to dissuade somebody from striking a missile on that site. And if you ever got a chance to talk to him, he would tell you, as he was counting down, there was a part in the back of his mind is, man, I hope we are not wrong. And somebody decides to win, and it worked out.
Yeah.
So the missiles came in. The next night was the ugly baby infill.
Okay.
So now the night after the ugly baby infill, we are dispersing the teams dedicated to this mission down to Halabja. And as I said, it's about a 2-hour drive. So you can picture, we did the cruise missile strike. We left that, drove back to Soleimani where the airfield was, picked up our teams, dispersed the teams, and then drove back. There's a lot of driving going on. So we introduced all of our teams to the commanders that are going to conduct this attack. The way the Kurds broke it down, they called them prongs, which we would call axis of advance. They basically had 4 axes of advance. Each axis was going to be a Kurdish unit of 1,000 with a special forces team attached to it. And they were all color-coded, red, blue, yellow, green. Yeah, those were the 4 colors. And they were all going to go up, a mountain valley, if you will, and clear all the objectives. As we got closer to the operation, the Kurds identified there's another axis they need to attack, which became the black prong. So 5,000 Kurds were committed as the 5 prongs, if you will. And then they had a 5,000-man reserve. And that's when I say I could look out and see, yes, there are 10,000 people here waiting to conduct this attack. We did get some close air support missions, but not nearly as much as we had hoped, whether it be a B-52 strike or they were episodic over the course of, say, the next 4 days. But like I said, the decision was made, hey, we go tomorrow. And I want to say, my timing is a little tricky to kind of remember this exactly. We're going to conduct the attack tomorrow. I feel like the United States kicked off the shock and awe campaign yesterday, which surprised us. We didn't get any advance warning. We didn't know. But now try to imagine from our perspective, the emphasis of, okay, we are on the clock.
So the ground strike or the ground invasion had already begun.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if anybody who was, who was there or involved, it caught us all off guard. And there's some reasons. I know the reasons. President Bush, made the decision, tell him to go now. And it was largely because they were trying to track where Saddam Hussein was. So the ground invasion kicked off with no warning. None of the Americans knew it was going to kick off in a half hour. So we got that word. which is fine because we're prepared to kick this attack up. But like I say, try to put this in mental context. We have got to complete this attack and reposition these 10,000 Kurdish forces to be a threat to the Iraqis before Saddam Hussein decides to maneuver some of his forces south in a counterattack against the Americans. Like, we've got to make that time window for this to be of value added.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my new concern this week, or this period of a few days. So the attack is going to kick off tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's the Kurdish plan. I will tell you, it's pretty impressive. They, anybody who's ever seen a large scale attack, like in training or in the American stuff, it's a habitual area where people mess up. They don't forecast the amount of time it takes to just position everybody on the limited trails and roads to get into position. The Kurds did it flawlessly. At 6 o'clock in the dark, on cue, like to the second, they fired the one cannon they had, which was the signal to start the attack, and everybody was in position, and we went. And it's surreal to talk about it to a degree, because from my perspective, it looked and felt like a medieval siege of a city or of a castle. That's what it felt like. Because from my position, and I was on a little hilltop, I can physically see the 5 1,000-man prongs moving forward. And I can see them getting into skirmish firefights with like little OP outposts, which they are just wiping out. And if you can picture the way the terrain goes, from where we start the attack, it's flat plains for like 5 kilometers. And those flat plains have a couple of these little enemy OPs on them, and there's some minefields. And then it starts to turn into rolling hills. And then those rolling hills turn into crazy mountains.
All right.
So the enemy's perspective is, haha, you idiots are going to try to cross that open field. We're going to have skirmishes with you, and then you're going to hit our minefields. Well, that's exactly what happened. And when we hit the minefields, the teams deployed the equipment that we talked about, and suddenly the enemy saw us blow a hole through the minefield. And they still, engaged. And then suddenly aircraft appeared. And now we're dropping bombs, if not on the enemy, directly behind where they thought they were going to fall back to. And it was, and then like in the distance, you could see another layer of like a B-52 dropping its full accoutrement of payload of like 65 bombs, just totally lighting up a ridgeline. And then you look the other way and you see 1,000, 50 pickup trucks with 150 Kurds dismounted at the front of it, and they are trotting. They are moving very fast, and the ODA is running to keep up with them. That's what's going on across the entire battlefield. So the day progresses very well. But I mean, it sounds like I'm exaggerating to say, like, the special forces teams and their Kurdish counterparts, they're going to fight uphill for the next 12 hours. Like, it is a no kidding. They're in continuous fighting all day for 12 hours. And there's different parts of it. Each prong has different engagements that are incredibly dramatic or incredible firefights, but they do very, very well.
And just for people, like, so when the book comes out and they'll be able to see this, there you have very detailed maps in there that lay out like exactly where the prongs go. One thing I did when I was reading, and this is just me and how I have to follow along on a lot of these things. Like, I had Google Maps up, or I'd print it out, and then I'm looking where the cities actually are, because then your maps are like zoomed in and showing the actual valleys that people are cutting through and where the battles are happening. So, like, very highly detailed. It's super interesting the way it was.
No, like, maps are a big deal to me. Like, because I've read a lot of books, and if the maps aren't clear, like, I'm losing what you're saying. So that was one of my emphasis, to try to make it really clear what I was describing. So as the day's progressing, it's going shockingly well from my perspective. And let's say it's like we're getting into the late afternoon, and I know everybody's got to be exhausted. We're starting to culminate. We're doing well. We're not quite at as far as we wanted to go. We essentially really wanted to go to the Iranian border. We're probably like 4 to 2 kilometers from that position, but I'm starting to think like, hey, we're probably going to have to stop here, for the night. Of the different prongs, there's 2 that are of particular interest. One is heading toward that chemical facility that I talked about. And I remember as they started to get close to it, I was amazed. I'm like, wow, we're getting close to it. I can't believe it. Like, it's actually working. We're gonna get to the facility. Another one farther south is heading to a place called Dargashakan, which is a suspected foreign fighter training camp. And that was of particular interest to us. Same thing, that Kurdish element and their special forces team are reporting on the radio, hey, they're on the high ground, they can see the camp. And I'm like, I cannot believe it. We are in sight of the camp. And the special forces team reports they're loading up into trucks. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, I cannot believe it. We got them. Because the training camp in particular is literally less than a kilometer from the Iranian border. And it's a straight road. So like our fear was we're going to get up there and they're just going to get in their cars and drive across the Iranian border. But now we're on a piece of high ground and we're looking at them and they're loading up their trucks. So like I said, we're like, haha, we got them. I can't believe it. Like we've got them. We get on the radio and we start calling for an airstrike. And the B-52 comes on the radio and says they cannot drop because it's outside their rules of engagement. And I got on the radio personally and got into an argument with these guys. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they said, we are not allowed to drop within 5 kilometers of the Iranian border. I got into a significant argument with them that was inaccurate, that we had much more accommodating rules of engagement, if you will, and told them, you need to drop right now. This argument went on for like 20 minutes. They finally came back after calling CENTCOM and agreed, oh, we can drop now. I'm like, and at the time, it was too late.
Yeah.
The ODA had reported they had loaded up like 20, 18-wheeler sized trucks, if you will, and drove across the Iranian border. This is why this is significant. We didn't think much of it at the time, but going back to General Colin Powell's speech on the floor of the UN, he kept talking about this foreign fighter that was affiliated with Al-Qaeda called Zarqawi. And again, at that time, nobody knew who Zarqawi was. Like, you're like, yep, got it, just another terrorist name. So it's highly likely, we know Zarqawi was with Ansar al-Islam.
Okay.
And if he was with them, it's highly likely he would have been at this campsite. So it's highly likely we lost him, we had him, and we lost him going across the border. And for listeners that don't know these things, Zarqawi is an individual that was affiliated with Al-Qaeda, actually somewhat problematic for Osama bin Laden, because he was too, bin Laden's leadership, they looked at him like, hey, this guy is too off the reservation. He's not in line with the Al-Qaeda mindset. He's a little too crazy. He resurfaced a year later in Iraq and created the thing that became known as Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That thing, after he was killed, I think in 2006 or 7, his movement turned into the thing that we now call ISIS.
Okay. It's pretty crazy when you detail like all the history and you look back, like just how interconnected everything is, right? Everything overlaps. The one thing I'm wondering too is, so when these guys flee across a border, and as I was reading this too, I was thinking like, do they intentionally build these things along the border because they know like, I'm going to drive across that magical line and be like, look at the GPS, like you can't touch me, and just kind of flipping you the bird right there. And you're like, I could just send a bullet, but I'm not allowed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And well, I mean, one, it's hard terrain, so it works in their favor, but having a border that they can pop across is very advantageous to them, to the point where the camp I'm talking about, we actually observed Iranian helicopters coming in and dropping off ammunition and getting out.
Yeah.
So I mean, they have some degree of support from the Iranian government because it keeps the Iraq, like theoretically it's creating a buffer zone between them and the Iraqis. But so we lost that opportunity at Dargash Khan. We did bomb the camp. We did seize the camp after most of the occupants had withdrawn. And we got tons of, intelligence and great stuff from that camp, but we lost that one opportunity.
Can you talk about what and maybe you're getting to it, but what you find in the camp?
Yeah.
Because what was detailed there, I thought was like, wow, you could probably write a whole book on just the camp. But
and it wasn't just this camp, it was in the other sites too, but we found tons of foreign passports. We found formulas, like we found various books with formulas for creating nerve agent. I think nerve agent was the only ones we found written in the books. We found all sorts of bomb making materials, like some really innovative stuff, like how they would take explosives, melt the explosives down to a liquid, and then pour it into like a 22 millimeter shell casing where it would resolidify, it would dry and harden, and then put a grenade fuse in that. So they were basically making like improvised grenades from the pieces they had. That's the kind of stuff they were doing. We also found documents. We found documents that were given to me by a journalist, and I greatly appreciated this, that they had recovered on a site that explained, that linked this site to Afghanistan. Basically, they showed us documents from Afghanistan saying, the Americans are overrunning us in Afghanistan. We need to shift to Halabja. And here they are in Halabja, and they're like, we finally figured out where Halabja was because we had documents from Afghanistan saying we got to shift operations to Halabja. And he goes, we spent weeks looking at Afghan maps trying to figure out where Halabja was. So that's generally the gist of the kind of stuff, the materials we found on site. At the northernmost prong, essentially, that reached the chemical facility, they got into some very, very significant fighting over that facility, or the area around that facility. The area had a bunch of caves, so fighters started just pouring out of the caves, to which the team engaged. We captured one, a Palestinian who we determined later to be an Al-Qaeda cadre member, a training member. And if one of the things about that particular fight that's just insane to talk about, it's a great firefight. It's pieces of high ground, like the hills are basically, enemy would be on one hilltop and the Kurds and our guys would be on another hilltop, and they would be engaging each other from across the valley, like a kilometer apart. And there was one time where the Kurdish entity and the team got pinned down, and it was really, really bad. And I talk about this at length in the book. 3 of the ODA, the Special Forces team guys, the ODA guys, knew, hey, we got to go relieve pressure on them. So they raced back to their pickup truck, where they had some heavier weapons. They drove the truck a couple hundred meters to what they thought was a better position. While they drove the truck, bullets hit the truck and literally broke the windshield and broke the passenger window while the 2 guys were still sitting in the front. The bullets went between them.
Jeez.
They get out of the truck, and I don't mean to sound dramatic about this, but this is actually very true. This is the way guys are in a team. They're more, I don't want to say offended. That's a weird word, but they're energized by how dare you're trying to kill my teammates more than they are scared.
Yeah.
They're more pissed off.
I mean, but it's literally like love of your brothers on the team that are energizing them. So they stop the truck, they get out, and they know they want to maneuver the 50 caliber, our American 50 caliber machine gun to a piece of high ground, because the thing that's causing to pin down the Kurdish column, if you will, is a large enemy machine gun. I can't remember if it's like a 12 millimeter or 14 millimeter, but it's sort of like the equivalent of their 50 caliber, if you will, a little bit larger. So these guys get out of the truck, and this team, as a lot of the teams are, but they're a particularly physically fit team. They were always like that. And this is worth explaining. During the break, I was talking to John, and you heard me say this. This was one of the teams that, when they were briefing their plan, did a terrible job. Their briefing was so bad. And when they finished briefing, some of the guys that I had known, because I had been their company commander, pulled me aside, and they were panicky, like, "Sir, don't take us off this mission." And I laughed. I was like, "What are you guys talking about?" And I was like, "You get no one's pulling you guys off any mission. This is your mission." And I told them, you guys suck at briefings. Mm-hmm. Thank God I'm not sending you to brief. But I said that jokingly, like, that was the attitude we had. Like, I know my guys. It's not all contingent on just a briefing. I know who's good, at stuff. And these guys this is that team. And they were particularly a strong team. One of the individuals, who's a super fit guy, doesn't even take the time. And I literally clarified this with him, a year ago when I was talking about this. They take the machine gun and the tripod the machine gun is on. And I can't remember the specifics of that now, but I want to say the combined weight of that is about 150 pounds. And when I knew this story, I just assumed they broke it down into pieces. And I come to find out, no, Blake just picked the whole damn thing up, threw the tripod on his back with the M2 machine gun attached. If you don't really understand how insane that is,
yeah.
And I understand if many listeners are like, well, that's just not physically possible. You are very close to correct. That does not seem possible at all. But I know this is exactly what happened. He throws the tripod on his back with the M2. The other guys pick up multiple cans of 50 caliber ammo, and now they proceed to run up like a broken rock talus slope for the next couple hundred meters to get this machine gun to a superior piece of high ground. And again, they do this as soon as they get to the top, and they're getting shot at. As soon as they get to the top, they drop the gun, somebody else opens the feed tray to the gun, somebody else just throws a belt of ammunition right in the feed tray. It's like they rehearse this, and they immediately get the gun into operation. And as soon as one guy jumps behind the gun, another guy starts telling him where the enemy is, spotting for him, and they immediately start to put 50 caliber rounds across the valley onto the Dishka machine gun that's shooting at their fellow team members and the Kurdish guys. And they put accurate fire on it. They put several hundred rounds of 50 caliber ammo right onto that gun and basically broke the enemy with that.
Yeah.
And there's several other events just like that. That one stands out as, particularly, amazing, if you will. But that's the kind of stuff the guys were doing. And they were doing the same thing, like communicating between the valleys for mortar support with each other or Barrett 50 cal sniper rifle support. And it became very effective because if you could imagine, the enemy is used to a very frontal fight.
Mm-hmm.
You're in front of me and you and I are going to try to kill each other and we're just going to advance this way. Now we're communicating across the valleys. So the enemy is taking fire from not just their front, but probably one of their flanks. And they're not prepared for that. And if that's not making it worse, from time to time, we're also getting close air support that's dropping a bomb again, right on them or right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really impressive to watch the choreographed assault on this entrenched enemy. That's kind of how my first day ended, or the first day of this battle. And this is where it gets a little bit weirder. So as it's getting late, one of the team leaders, a different element, calls me on the radio, and he's just telling me how it's going. And he's talking to the company commander, George Thebes, he's the company commander that is coordinating these 5 teams. I'm next to him, sort of working with the hire and the aircraft and things like that. And the team leader says, "Hey, a sniper just killed the guy to my left, a Kurdish guy." And we're like, "Okay." Calls a minute later, he's like, "Hey, a sniper just shot and killed the guy to my right." To which I'm like, "Hey, Steve, I think you need to find a different position. I think, I don't think I'm going to get a third radio call from you if you don't move." He repositions, and that's when we gave the guidance to the teams. Hey guys, it's starting to get dark. It's time to hold what you've got and start looking for a defendable position.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't fight till the last moment of darkness. Spend the next half hour deciding this is where we're going to hold up for the night. That to me seemed like infantry-wise good guidance. I would say a half hour later, I turn around and I see the guy, Steve, that I was just talking about with the snipers. I see Steve standing behind me with a plate of food. And I'm completely confused by this. And to the point, I'm like, what? I don't even know what to say. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, "Oh, we came back down the mountain for chow." And again, I think the gears in my head were breaking. I'm like, "What do you mean you came down the mountain for chow?" And he's looking at me and he's like, no, it's okay. This is the way they do it. And he's not wrong. There's sort of this, like, what I'd call a half-assed gentleman's agreement that nobody fights at night because of the minefields and things. So like when darkness falls, it's almost like a golf game. Like you just put a marker out where your ball was, and we can take a break, go eat chow, whatnot, and we'll pick it back up in the morning where we stopped.
Crazy. It's so different.
Yeah, it is crazy. So they're explaining to me, they're like, "Oh no, the Kurds know what they're doing. They left a small contingent to keep the position, and everybody else comes down the mountain for chow." And the Kurds had like chow ready. They had chicken and rice and all this stuff for them. So again, my brain is breaking. I'm like, I'm having a hard time fathoming this, but like the Kurds are looking at me like, "No, this is all good. It's fine." So I'm like, unbelievable. So while I'm trying to process this, our signal intercept teams that we have in our organization are intercepting enemy communications. And you had asked earlier, like, did they have radios? Not really. Everybody communicates by cell phone. Everybody's got a cell phone. So we had intercepted the enemy's cell phone calls, if you will, and they all were telling everybody, just like we're having chicken and rice now at the bottom of our hill, they're like, "Hey, everybody needs to come back to this grid coordinate so we can rest and refit and recover." I'm not really on board with the plan that, like, we all agree we're not going to fight at night.
I'd be dropping bombs on that thing right away.
Well, this is talk about serendipitous. This is crazy. Almost by coincidence again, I get another call that AC-130s are the American they're the American gunships built into the 130 aircraft. Massive lethal firepower. Insane. Not really that good for a conventional fight. Like if you were fighting tank units and, the Iraqi Army, but for this kind of fight, they're super valuable. And up to this point in the conflict, they have been unavailable. Now suddenly they got released, partially again because of Turkey, and they've deemed that the threat where I am it's not the same kind of air defense threat that you would experience with the Iraqi Army.
Mm-hmm.
So I got 4 C-130s, AC-130s, come online on radio and said, "Hey, does anybody have any targets?" And I'm like, as a matter of fact, I do. And I can tell you, in my career, I've never seen 4 AC-130s at once. Like that's a pretty astonishing number of aircraft in this kind of firepower. And here we are. I'm like, hey, by the way, here's the enemy's objective rally point where they're all mustering for the night to refit. If you guys want to just go hammer that would be great. So our group all like hunkers down in this little small bunker to try to get like a half hour's sleep. And I'm talking about like me and Colonel Tovo and like 6 other guys that are with us. George, Colonel, everybody's been promoted since then. So I'm slipping on the ranks that they retired at. But Major Thebes, he's the company commander counterpart, our radio operators, that kind of thing. We're in this tiny little bunker. It's filled with, a puddle of water. And we're listening to the AC-130s just hammer these guys all night. And I think we probably all got like 15 minutes to 30 minutes of sleep that night because we all rotated and, we're on radio watch. So as the sun is coming up, the AC-130s now on the radio say, hey, we're Winchester, which is the code. That's the term you use to say we're out of ammunition. So 4 AC-130s report, hey, we're Winchester, which I'm like, my brain, I'm still like, oh my God, that's a lot of shooting. Like that's an unbelievable.
I'm surprised there's mountains left.
Yeah.
You're just sawing them in half.
And I'm thinking, man, I didn't sleep that well last night, but I know I had a better night than the enemy did.
Yeah.
And because the sun's coming up, they're like, hey, we don't like to be up. We don't want to be flying around when the sun's up. We're going back to home station. I'm like, guys, appreciate it. Incredible job. Fantastic. So as the plan went, like the sun comes up and everybody drives back to their former position from the night before, and we resume the battle as if nothing happened. So Tovo looks at me and he goes, hey, let's go join the Green Prong, which is the one near the chemical facility. So we jump in our vehicles and we follow the Kurdish contingent to pick up where they left off. Now that the sun's up, the attitude's a little different this morning, and it's now an enemy rout. Like the enemy has woken up and resolved themselves to they're going to run for the Iranian border. Which I know what you're thinking. Why didn't you guys start running like 2 hours ago under darkness? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, cause, I mean, I guess because like they were still eating breakfast or whatever. But now the rules are that the sun's up, we're going to go for it, and they are literally where I am with the Green Prong and the Special Forces team and the Kurds. We're about 2 kilometers from the Iranian border. I can see the Iranian border, and we can see guys literally running in like knee-deep snow trying to make it. So it was like this on all the prongs. Like we were basically now mopping up the last remnants of the enemy for the most part. We did end up firing on the guys that were running for the Iranian border, and I'll say got them. They messed up. They actually crossed the border, but then came back to the border with an Iranian flag waving it, like taunting us, which was really weird because I was like, we can shoot them.
Yeah.
To which we did with mortars, and ended up killing these guys on the Iranian border, which was a bad move on their part. After we did that, by the way, the Iranian border guards got the message and they started shooting guys trying to cross the border, like almost to give us the thumbs up, like, hey, we're good. We're not with them. And we saw those bombs you guys have. They're bad people. So that's sort of how it was going on most of the prongs, except the northernmost one, which was called the Black Prong. And that was like, say, if you could picture it to my left. They were still under some really surprising, intense fighting. This was that prong that we didn't fully plan for. Like it was added at the last minute.
Yeah.
And John, she said, like, because it was added at the last minute, we didn't really have forces for this. So we had to break up an ODA and go split team, where half the ODA went that way. And now half of the ODA, which was led by the team sergeant, was on the Black Prong. And this, to me, I kind of like this story too. We were listening to them on the radio. I could see them in the distance, which from my position, they were like, ants running around on the concrete. Like that's what it looked like. Because these are barren valleys with no trees. So the team sergeant is reporting, and the team sergeant's name was Master Sergeant Kevin Cleveland. He passed away several years ago from cancer, but that's why I kind of like telling the story, because what he did was so impressive. he's reporting on the radio that the enemy are just pouring out of these caves. There's hundreds of enemy. So we're going to get close air support as fast as we can. And he says, they're about to get overrun. And he actually, I mean, this for me at that point in my experience was really something to listen to, where he says, hey, drop the bombs on my position. We're going to get overrun. And he actually took the time to call a linear pattern. So we plotted a wall of 5 bombs to his front, danger close.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can see all of this, watching the bombs come down and just explode, scorch the valley. The echo reverberates off the walls of the canyons. It's really unbelievable to watch. And what's interesting is all the Kurds with us, then their cell phones start to ring. And it's the guys who were with Kevin Cleveland on the ground are literally dialing their Kurdish commanders and screaming, turn off the bombing. It's too close. It's too close. But we did, and they were okay. But we did break the enemy in an assault, a counterattack, trying to overrun their position. And we broke it with danger close airstrike right to their front. And that was largely Master Sergeant Kevin Cleveland was doing. It was a bold move, and it was really heroic in my opinion. So that was the last piece that we mopped up. So now that the attack on Ansar Islam is largely over, and we did, I should point out, I didn't mention it, we did get a delivery of lethal aid the night before. Ammunition and guns actually arrived at our airfields, and we pushed it forward the night before. But the 10,000 guys here, they're picking up weapons off the battlefield. They're picking up weapons of all the dead and ammunition. So they are loaded for bear, and morale is sky high, because you got to understand, this entity that they just wiped out has been, the bane of their existence for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
By the way, this is also like sacred territory. This is where those chemical attacks took place back in 1988. So to the Kurdish culture, this is sacred ground. The fact that it's occupied by these guys was just an insult. And these guys have been killing and torturing Kurds for the last, 3, 4, 5 years. So to wipe this entity off their plate was just massive. It was incredible. It wasn't just like, oh, good victory in battle. So they picked up all this stuff off the battlefield now, and they are so fired up to now go to the next objective, which is Saddam. And I mean, it's weird to explain it that way, because it was like this sort of mind shift of, we have done all these things in sequence, and we have done them fast enough that they're still viable, and of value. And the American forces that are advancing from the south, if anybody who remembers this kind of stuff, they got bogged down. They got hit by a sandstorm, and they didn't reach their final objectives as fast as they thought they would. So this all still has value.
Yeah.
So now I got of the 10,000 Kurds on this battlefield, the Kurds are going to leave 1,000 behind to maintain control of this area. The other 9,000 are getting in cars with their newfound equipment and weapons, and they are driving to the Green Line with us. And they do.
Is this where the battle kind of shifts toward, now you're planning for, it's Kirkuk?
Yeah. So, I mean, we are now entering a phase of this plan where we are in sight of pulling off what we had always intended, tying up Saddam's forces. And this is probably a good point to explain. Earlier I talked about how I felt like I started to see things through Saddam's strategy. I started to just really understand it. And there was a moment where I was looking at a map at Fort Carson where I had an epiphany. And Saddam had his forces arrayed in the defensive positions, right? And we, from an American infantry perspective, we would talk about it was a defense in depth. It had about 3 layers. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, hey, the first layer are not his best troops, and they're at low strength. They're like 50 to 75% strength. The second belt is at 75% strength. The third belt are his elite units, the Republican Guard, Nebuchadnezzar Republican Guard, things like that. And it dawned on me, we can't just try to cause attrition on the front edge of his defenses, meaning we can kill all of his first and frankly all of his second line of defenses. If we do that, but deplete our forces to where we are no longer a viable threat, it doesn't matter if we kill 10 times more of them than us. He still has the flexibility to maneuver his divisions south. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So as Sun Tzu recommends, you were attacking his strategy. and not his forces.
Yeah, and to me, this was like for me one of the most important epiphanies of understanding his strategy of, hey guys, I used to actually describe by holding up an 8x10 piece of paper, and I said on the ground, and I'd lay it flat. I said we only see this edge. I need to affect the back edge of it, and I'm not going to do that by just killing. If that was my strategy, and I think I'm going to kill fast enough to finally make it to the back edge through the 3 layers of defense, that's a pretty bad approach. So we've got to do stuff that compels him that he can't move his forces south. And as I say that, I realize, again, there was a disagreement between us and CENTCOM. Remember I talked about in the beginning how CENTCOM's attitude toward this mission was almost like, hey, look, go do your special forces thing. We don't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, they would brief that, yeah, special forces is going to be in the north and they're going to fix the enemy. And the instructor in me used to always get upset by that because I'm like, I don't mean to nitpick you guys, but the military has very specific definitions for terms. Fix is a term that we use to imply that I am forcing the enemy through fire that he cannot move. And they're like, right, you're going to go fix the enemy. I'm like, you guys aren't mentally understanding the battlefield. I am north of the enemy. There's a frontline area between me and the enemy. I'm trying to prevent the enemy from going south. I can't fix him from north of him, if that makes sense. And literally, the conventional military guys were almost like, oh, good Lord, you and your whatever, come on, man, just go do your special forces thing and just leave this to us. So that's why this was so important to me that I'm like, the approach has got to be more than just dropping bombs and killing these guys. So while the Ansar attack was ongoing, I talked about we've got probably roughly 10 teams up along what we call the Green Line. And they had been slowly harassing the enemy to some degree, calling close airstrikes when they can, in a couple of rare cases, doing some things like firing mortars or sniper rifles at them. But we also started to think about this, and we knew the enemy knows we are here. Like, the jig is up. They pretty much know now that bombs are falling from the sky. We're here. So we can't hide it anymore. So how can we exploit that? So like in one particular case, there was one enemy position where and we could see them all. They're all on a ridge line. Like, it's a very prominent, distinct ridge. The day before, the Iraqis had killed a Kurdish woman who was moving through a checkpoint because she had a jar of like gasoline because they ration everything. And, basically they caught her smuggling gasoline, it'd be the equivalent of like a mayonnaise jar. So they poured it on her and lit her on fire and killed her. So we were aware of that. That day, it was actually Joe Locke's team again, which was ODA 083. They had a very fortunate opportunity. A B-52 came on station, which was not, at this point in the conflict, that was not normal. A B-52 came on station and said, hey, I have a full complement of bombs. Does anybody have any targets? And they had spent all day plotting each position on this ridgeline to where they had, here's the 65 positions on the ridgeline. So the B-52, was like, okay, we're gonna drop our entire load and destroy this entire ridgeline. And what's interesting is the Kurdish commander working with Joe Locke, actually asked and made a point of all the bombs you're going to drop or all the positions you're going to destroy. I want this one position. I want this one destroyed first.
Yeah.
And Joe was like, well, why? And he's like, that's the one that killed the woman. Mm-hmm. And and it's funny when Joe and I get together, we laugh at this quite a lot because he's like, you do know the difference between these positions is going to be like 1 second. But he's like, but hey, I'm down with that. No problem. So the first bomb they dropped killed the guys that killed the woman yesterday. And then they proceeded to drop bombs on the entire rest of the ridge. Now, when I say this was a fortunate strike, because it was also raining, so most of the Iraqi soldiers were in their bunkers. So like we wiped down an entire battalion in one strike, which was amazing. But this is almost the point. Now we followed it up because my Kurds all communicate with Iraqi soldiers. Like they all have their phone numbers. It's a little weird, but that's just the way it is. So it was very easy for us to coordinate. I need you to get a message to that Iraqi unit across the front line. And they're like, what do you want us to tell them? Tell them we killed that entire battalion today because they killed a civilian woman. And this is the message we sent. We can kill any of them anytime we want. That's not really a true statement, but that's what we told them.
Yep.
I mean, that's what we told them. We're like, and we're not killing you because we're trying to get you guys to surrender. But if you guys continue to harm civilians, we will just kill all of you, like we killed that unit yesterday. And like we elaborate on this quite a lot.
Yep.
We actually wrote a document, English on one side, Arabic on the other, signed by Lieutenant Colonel Tovo. We embossed it with a Trojan horse, crest of the unit, and we said, I wish I had a copy of it. It read like a telemarketer's spam.
Mm-hmm.
It said, we filled the blank in, but it was like, Dear General so-and-so, we have deliberately selected you because you have an excellent reputation among the Iraqi people. You are considered a great leader in your country. The time to act is now. Your country needs you. It is time to make the right decision, and this went on and on. And at the end of it, it said, please contact us by one of the following means. But act now. Time is limited. This offer,
Yeah, it's all the marketing scam.
Operators are standing by.
Yeah, but like this is exactly what we did. And then the CIA printed the letter in Arabic on one side, English on the other. We laminated it and we sent it through what I'm going to call underground couriers to deliver it to contacts on the Iraqi side. Pretty decent plan. Saddam implemented very, very smart countermeasures. Now, if anybody remembers, the Gulf War was characterized by massive Iraqi surrenders. Like most of the Iraqi army in Kuwait surrendered, thousands. We expected that to happen. We were not prepared for what Saddam had done to prevent that. And Saddam did a couple of things. He told everybody, hey, if anybody surrenders like those guys did on the last war, I'm killing your entire extended family. So there was that. He also then, as we were reported, at a staff meeting with his division commanders, literally said, hey, before we start the meeting, I got a quick announcement. I need everybody to get up and move to the seat to your left. That's now your new division. Now, that sounds crazy the way I just said it, but like he just swapped division commanders with different divisions to prevent, if there's any little schemes you guys got going with your officers. So now, a new general officer goes back to his division and he doesn't know any of his officers. And they're all looking at each other like, who's going to speak first? Like, who's going to be the fool that's going to suggest, is the plan to surrender still on? Because everybody is now terrified and trying to rat out who are the defectors, if you will. That was really effective. Like Saddam's efforts to do that were really, really good. So like, and also in at least one case, our underground courier was, as far as we know, killed. So we started to change the message a little bit and say, your officers have deserted you. Do you think I'm lying? Have you seen your officers recently? And actually, this is true. Mm-hmm. Like the officers are fleeing. And they're leaving all the enlisted on the front line. So we're telling them, why are you going to die? Your officers have already come up with a plan. And what we didn't fully grasp this, but this is really important. We thought we were trying to get them to surrender. They know that surrender is not an option, but desertion is an option. So most of the officers are coming up with plans to desert their unit and head to Syria. And so we loosely became aware of this as the third option. So that's why we started manipulating the enlisted to tell them, your officers are abandoning you. They're leaving you to die. Take matters into your own hands. Kill your officers. Yeah. Kill your officers. And again, I have no idea how effective was that, but we were bombarding their ranks with these kinds of messages. So, I'll call that my subversion effort that I thought was pretty useful. We also got feedback from the Kurds early in our relationship as we're building our rapport and our relationships. The Kurds asked us, hey, why did you say that to the Iraqis? And we don't know what they're talking about. And I'll jokingly say, like, this is a part of Kurdish and Arabic culture to be polite. Like, when I say be polite, they don't want to offend me with a direct question, like challenging, what am I doing? They're subtly asking me, I don't understand why you did that. And we don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. And finally, we realized they're like, the message that you are, not us, this is coming from the United States, like CENTCOM, the message that you are broadcasting to the entire Iraqi army to surrender. Literally, this is exactly what the conversation with the guy said. I just wouldn't do it that way. And we're like, what do you mean? You know what you're doing. What we found out was the message was being broadcast in, if not by a woman, an effeminate tone, meaning like the choice of grammar and the sound of it was, as they put it, effeminate. Now, we probably perceive that to be, we're just being professional and polite. They perceive that as very insulting. Yeah. And this is like the differences of where language is important. Also in the Iraqi culture, we suggested they consider surrendering. we just thought that was normal.
Yep.
But they're like, that's the most offensive thing you can say to a man. And we're like, what do you mean? And like, you need to tell a man he has no choice. You will kill him if he doesn't surrender. And they're like, a man can accept that. But if you're saying a man has a choice and he can decide to surrender, you're basically implying he's a coward.
Yeah, and there's a difference between, whether you're going to, like, your option is die or do this other thing. So at least they can save face, if they have to.
Yeah, so they're telling us, they're like, there's no possible way any male could accept your surrender the way you've said it, even if they wanted to. We're like, wow, that's good feedback. We actually pushed that up the chain. We actually got a note from Condoleezza Rice back thanking us for that feedback. So that also contributed to why we were having a hard time with guys not surrendering. I tell you that because the non-kinetic or subversive activities I think were really, really important. So we realized Kirkuk is the main city across from me. It's the main city in Iraqi territory that we need to threaten that will force Saddam to not feel comfortable diverting his forces south. This is one of those weird things that CENTCOM was never 100% on board with this. Like they almost took it as, yeah, you guys are going to do that special forces thing and just tie up the Iraqi forces. And they didn't really peel apart with this. Well, how do you think we do that? I think they were thinking, you'll just kill them all. I'm like, I can't kill them all. I need to threaten something that's important to them that makes them feel uncomfortable with diverting forces south. And that thing is the city. It's Kirkuk and Mosul. So we started to work on, we started talking about how do we want to take Kirkuk. We essentially surrounded it. So you got this subversive effort going on with the forces that are inside the city or surrounded defenses around the city. We're also telling the Iraqi people, hey, war crimes will not be tolerated, meaning don't blow up oil wells. And if you do commit a war crime, we will know who you are and we will prosecute you. You will be found after the war is over. Do not. So we're telling underground elements, protect the key city sites, and we're telling the population, don't let this happen. We also, mostly through the CIA, who were great partners in this endeavor, we were funneling guns through the underground into the city to conduct some of these activities, like weapons and things like that. We were also like funneling. This sounds really old school, but it works like a charm. Like the CIA was printing out flyers that said things like Saddam is done, Saddam's time is over. And they would deliver the printed flyers to an underground courier who would then take them into town, go to a high building at lunchtime and throw them off the roof of the building. And they would, waft all over the streets. Those kind of things like might not impress people, but they're pretty easy efforts and they have an impact.
Yeah.
Because it demonstrated to people that Saddam is not all powerful. He's not able to stop these subversive activities. Maybe he will lose. Like
in an area like that too, once you start speaking out against somebody, right? Like generally, I guess if anyone else did that, not in this time, you're going to get killed, and they'll probably kill your whole family. Yeah. But the fact that people are even willing to speak out now, the population starts to see that and go, "Okay, something's up. Yeah. Like we are moving in a direction now."
We had, I'm going to use the term underground agents, which is a doctrinal term for, in the resistance. We had agents of the underground conducting, making graffiti essentially in the city of Kirkuk, like spray painting stuff like, Saddam is finished. Thank you, Mr. Bush. But what's funny is I used to ask people all the time, like, if you were going to have somebody put anti-Saddam graffiti, where do you think they should spray paint it? And, the answer I can tell you is we did it in the pro-Saddam neighborhoods because he would launch his secret police to crack down in that neighborhood and find out who did this. And they were not people from that neighborhood, but they were loyalists. So he was pissing off the loyalists by sending the police there. And it just caused a lot of confusion. We also had the underground providing us very, very good intel of here's what the Iraqis are doing in the city, which somewhat translated to targeting for bombing, later.
With this, and maybe this is kind of like just to equate it to something, and John, if maybe you're the historian, so maybe you can help out. Would this be similar to like the French World War II? Like you're getting those underground elements.
Yes, exactly. This is where the doctrine. This is where the doctrine was developed because special forces actually There's the whole lineage thing with the first Special Service Force, aka the Devil's Brigade. But the thing is, it's like from the first commander, Aaron Bank on down, they'll tell you that SF was founded in the 50s by veterans of the OSS operational groups. And it's where we get the detachment organization. It's where we get a lot of the doctrine from guerrilla movements in the European and Pacific theaters. And you had the French Resistance, where they were they're big at. You see in a lot of the war movies where the French Resistance is like blowing up bridges and stuff like that. And actually, their most vital function was, um, you know, convoys got to go from point A to point B, and they're driving through a town, and you can't stop some woman who's hanging out her laundry from looking at the vehicles and going
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 self-propelled guns are heading in this direction. She reports that to her supervisor, and it eventually winds up getting back to Allied intelligence. And that's what
Wow.
the resistance can do for you.
And by the way, to what John just said too, is the operational groups of the OSS. That's where the name Special Forces Group comes from. Group is not a name we use in any other Army structure. The Special Forces groups are the only ones called groups.
Oh, okay.
But so going back there, so like we're talking with the Kurds about this, where we're doing these subversive activities inside the city, trying to get a little more depth to what we're doing, and we're also starting to surround the city. So I've got teams, attacking from the north. I've got multiple teams attacking from the east, and I've got one team that I'm now pushing to the south to attack from the south. I've got another team that, this is one of these other weird things. Like the Kurds are like, we're like, hey, how do you think we should attack Kirkuk? And they say something like, this is the way we normally do it. And that's when you realize you're like, how many times have you guys attacked this city? And, they're like, well, I've attacked it twice. My dad attacked it 3 times. You're like, okay. So they almost look at you like, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be done. And one of the things they said was the first thing you want to do is you want to cut the north-south highway south of Kirkuk. And that's in a place called Tuz. So we sent an ODA down there. And in the book, I talk about it. By the way, it's the same ODA that had the guys that carried the M2 on their back, the 50 caliber machine gun. When they drove there at night, they realized they were driving through a minefield. And one of the, they got out in front of the vehicle with flashlights and walked for several hours through the minefield until they finally hit road again to get to their new destination. Just another day, it's typical work of the team.
Maybe I'll mention too, just for a timeline. So this is because I had it written down here. This was April, beginning of April, and
first week of April. Yeah.
This is around the time. So once you start surrounding Kirkuk with U.S. forces and Kurdish, Baghdad had fallen right around this time too.
Not yet. It's. I want to say it's on the 10th. I think it's April 10th. It falls.
Okay.
So like the fighting is very intense in the south. So again, there's this expiration date of, hey, we got to put the pressure on Saddam fast. So the teams are all getting into position. And by the way, like the teams all had very interesting different experiences. Like in some cases, when we told them you got to keep breaking through these defensive positions and get to the final positions outside the city. There's one case I talk about in the book where they were doing stuff like putting guys in the back of pickup trucks and throwing the tarp over the truck so they could drive through areas without the Iraqi soldiers seeing them. I mean, like this is the exact kind of stuff we do in the Special Forces course at Robin Sage that you think at the time is unrealistic that you'll never do. And it's exactly what some of the teams did. But so we got the teams in position. We're on all sides of them. They're calling close air support missions. They're getting into some direct fire skirmishes. And it was all going pretty well. And I should point out, because people do sort of notice, the 173rd Airborne Brigade parachuted into my sister battalion's airfield, the same airfield they landed at. They parachuted in there about a week ago. And I don't, somebody interpreted when I said this before, like that I was talking bad about the 173rd. I don't mean to sound that way. I'm not talking bad about the 173rd, but it's the reality of the conventional military's dynamics. They refused to leave the airfield. And we honestly didn't need them at the airfield. We needed them at the Iraqi front line. And we had a very hard time, we were unsuccessful getting them to leave the airfield and join the fight for these cities. They never got involved, unfortunately. But so we surrounded the city. We had all this going on. We were actually at a planning meeting with the 173rd to talk about how we could take the city. And, the Kurds brought in what we called the old Peshmerga. And most of the Peshmerga, the commanders were probably about 50. These guys they brought in were in their 70s.
Yeah.
And it was really cool to see these guys in these old, the traditional army green uniforms, and they got a whole bunch of maps under their arms, and they're old and they're coming in, and they are excited to show us how they took the city in 1973 and 1984 and 1990. Like, they want to talk about, I know how to take the city. And they're showing us intelligence where every machine gun is marked on these maps, and it's marked. Their military graphics were good.
Mm-hmm.
173rd kind of blew them off, didn't want to hear it, and started to brief how they were going to take the city. And their plan was based on 2 weeks from now. It was a real long-term plan. Like, we will do this, and then we'll do this. And while we're in this briefing, all of the Kurds' cell phones start to ring again. And we're like, what's going on? And all the Kurds start to leave the room. So Tovo looks at me and he goes, go outside and find out what's going on. So I go outside and I find out, and I call one of our company commanders, Pat Roberson, he's essentially on the outskirts of Kirkuk. And I'm like, Pat, what's going on? And he goes, Kirkuk is falling. We're having a hard time keeping the civilians back from flooding into the city. So I was like, okay, we're on the way. We'll be there as fast as we can. We're probably 2 hours away. So I go in and I tell Tovo, I was like, Kirkuk is falling. So this whole discussion about how we would deliberately take Kirkuk is no longer relevant. So we say we're concluding the meeting. I could see the 173rd commander was very confused. And he said, are we going to recall this meeting? And I said, yes, we are. And he goes, where? I said, we're going to do it in Kirkuk tomorrow. We didn't have a great relationship, needless to say, but you could tell he was like, that's insane. What do you mean? How are we going to be in Kirkuk tomorrow? And I said, sir, the city is falling right now. It's time to go. And he said to me, it's one of my cheekiest moments. He said to me, do these Kurds really think they can win? And I literally looked at him. Now you got to appreciate, I have normally I don't have a mustache. I do now as a retiree, but I had a gigantic Kurdish mustache. I got this Kurdish neck scarf that I've been wearing. I look like a Kurd for all intents and purposes. And he said, do they really think they can win this fight? And I said, they're not picking this fight based on whether they think they can win. They're picking it based on it needs to be fought. And I whipped my scarf around and turned around and walked out.
Yeah.
I remember that from the book. That was like an inspiring moment, whipping the scarf.
So we all get in our vehicles and we are now racing full speed to link up with the guys who are on the outskirts of the city. Last night, the period of darkness, the teams all executed their own individual attacks of their portions of the city. And their attacks were incredibly intense. I could tell you about any one of them, but all of them had incredible, very incredible attacks. The one thing, it's similar to what I just said. I will tell you again about 083, that team. When they were planning their attack, their final assault on the last position before they entered the city, the team leader, he talked about how we're going to really show these guys in the U.S. military, now called Fort Moore, formerly called Fort Benning. That's the home of the infantry. Mm-hmm. And he said, we're going to show them a Fort Benning standard order, what it should be. We're going to show them a sand table. We're really going to show our professionalism and show them what a good briefing is like. So he was really proud of this assault briefing they put together. And he tells a story where his Kurdish counterpart was sort of neutral about it afterwards. And he's like, is there a problem? And he says, no, it's fine. And this goes back to that subtlety I said, where he probably says 2 or 3 times, it's fine. And on the last one, he just hints in, it's just not the way we normally do it. And, it keeps in on, he's like, what do you mean it's not normally the way you do it? And he's like, how many times have you attacked this position? And he's like, I've attacked it a few times. So he's like, well, you got anything you want to share? Mm-hmm. And it's this cultural thing of they're being polite. They don't want to usurp our, role. So, but when he invites him to, do you want to share? The guy lights up and is like, yeah, okay. Look, your map is wrong. That's not the way the terrain is. There's this gully behind this, and we can just get the whole force. He lays out the whole thing. All the Kurds acknowledge, yeah, we know how to do this. This is the way we always do it. So they quickly adjust the plan, and they did attack that way. The teams had really, really good success pushing into the city. Me and our contingent, Colonel Tovo, and the CIA guys with us are now racing on the main highway, entering Kirkuk. We finally linked up. We were able to catch up with Pat Roberson's guys that waited for us. as we're entering the city, it looks, in my opinion, everything I've ever seen from World War II for the liberation of Paris, the liberation of Antwerp. Like, the streets are jam packed with civilians, like to the point where it's hard for us to drive our vehicles. They're all cheering. It's really pretty incredible to see. And we get to this one intersection that has thousands of people in it, and my CIA counterpart, who was fantastic, he jumps out, comes over to my vehicle, and he says, "Hey, come here, I need your help." And he's got this box with him, and he just reaches into this box and pulls out these little American flags, like the kind, like that you would see at a parade.
Yep.
And he's like, "Here, pass these out." He's got this box with like 1,000 American flags that they brought with them. And we are now running around this intersection, passing these flags out to all the people on the street who were thrilled to have these American flags. But the point was the optic this is creating. Anybody who comes through this city now sees hundreds of people waving American flags on the street. It's really weird.
Yeah.
So we do this for the main part of the downtown city. And it's very viable because there is international journalists also breaking into the city to get the story. And we did this in front of journalists a couple of times, like where we would see, this is pretty underhanded stuff. We'd see some journalists on the corner, and we would literally position our vehicle. And like, I would look at one of the team guys and say, "Okay, go ahead and say what I told you to say." And they would shout in English, "Hey, are we going to put this in the truck?" And I'd be like, "I don't know." And the journalists would like swarm over to us like they just got this scoop, like, "Oh my God, are you guys Americans?" And we're like, "Ah," and we would act all freaked out, like, "Oh my God, you caught us." And they would start asking us questions. And we knew, for my journalist friends, I apologize for this, we knew we had to lie to them so they would spread our lie and keep us alive. And they're like, "Oh my God, who are you guys?" We're like, "We're the paratrooper brigade. There's 5,000 of us. There's actually 70 of us. Like, I can tell you for a fact, there's 70 Americans in the city right now." And we're telling them there's 5,000 American paratroopers in the city. "Where did you guys just come from?" And like, "We just came from the governor's building." Like, "Oh, they're all at the airfield." "Where'd you just come from?" "We were at the airfield." "Oh, they're all at the governor's building." So everybody knows secondhand that there's an American paratrooper brigade in the city, but nobody's actually seen it.
Yeah. And this later, you also speak like how that a lot of this is to play into like creating that illusion, right? Make sure that you can hold the city and people don't know what's real on the bad guy side.
Yeah, completely. And this goes back to why I harp so much on the importance of, I don't want to say subversion, but the information psyop side of this, because I don't have to kill everybody. I don't want to have to kill everybody. I want to convince them that their cause is hopeless. And that's actually easy to do. And it's actually more powerful. And now by spreading this common story of who the real winners are, everybody in the city is going to know. Like, we all see this in everyday life now. Like, whether it's true or not doesn't matter. I just need everybody to know it. So, like I said, I told my guys, "I need you guys to drive up and down every single street in this city." Like, we quadrant the city out and gave portions to the different teams. I was like, "Your mission is to drive up and down every single street of this city and make sure everyone in this city sees an American at least once a day."
Yeah.
Are we good? They're like, "Yeah." And it's like, this is the first time we put American flags on our uniforms. That night in the city, first night in the city, we're sleeping in an abandoned building, and you can still hear like gunfire on the outskirts. Like, there's still some weird elements, like still fighting. We made a decision the next morning to shave our mustaches and put on the American desert fatigues with patches. And literally we did that for two reasons. One, to look like different people. Like, if you were in the city yesterday and you saw those Americans in their camouflage uniforms with mustaches, that was good. Today you're going to see different Americans in desert uniforms. Like, we were literally trying to make it look like there were more Americans here. So we did that. I will say, the first time I appeared without a mustache, it would be the equivalent of a kid going to grade school with a shaved bald head. Like, all my Kurdish counterparts started making fun of me and laughing, which was very amusing. And it's just one of those cultural things. I stepped out of the room with no mustache, and they all burst laughing. I might as well have been wearing a dress, because they perceive that as every man has a mustache. That's just the way it is.
There's one part too that I think kind of is along the same lines of this, and it might be just a little bit ahead of where we are. But when you were talking about like the vacuum of leadership, and someone put up an American flag, and there was a debate over whether you're an occupier or not, and what the purpose or the intent of the flag was. I thought this was a really good discussion point.
So it was going pretty well. Everything seems to be going pretty well. So we set up shop at the governor's building, and we hoisted an American flag. And I can tell you from the perspective I have of the people around us, they all were okay with that. Meaning, like, they just wanted to know, what are the rules, who's in charge. And the majority of people I was dealing with were Kurdish, ethnically Kurdish. So they were happy to see us. They were very comfortable. And then we got word via the radio that we can't fly an American flag, and which was really confusing. And we're like, what are you talking about? And we're saying we're getting word from the Pentagon that we have to take down the flag. We are not occupiers. And I'm like, we need to be occupiers. Like, they want us to be occupiers, with the right message, meaning, hey, I'm currently the military authority in charge, but we're going to hand this back to an Iraqi entity as soon as we identify them. Like, that would have been a totally viable message to portray. Instead, we accidentally portrayed, whoa, I am not an occupier, and nobody else is in charge. And that's what opened the door, particularly more so in Baghdad, to just rampant looting. So for us, we were able to keep things under control in the north because of the Kurds, meaning, like, we took the U.S. flags down, which was super weird. But then the Kurds, the PUK rather, pushed 400 unarmed, uniformed police officers into the city. Like, I'm talking about, like, guys with, like, road guard vests, like crossing guards.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, the effect it had on stability was amazing. Again, the Kurds, they planned for this. They pushed forward, I forget how many, like say 50 buses to the city to maintain public transportation.
But you were saying, even on that though, was it before this or just after that you had that 24-hour grace period where because there was like a lot of people, when there's no control though.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might look like the occupier, but when there was zero control, nobody knew who was in charge. People were going out and getting revenge for all kinds of things, and it was like the purge out there.
It's a little bit awkward to explain. So, like, let's say we just took this city, and the city's in rough shape. It's a bit damaged. The population is freaked out. A lot of refugee population is trying to make their way back to the city, and there's a lot of conflict going on because Kurds are coming back to neighborhoods that have Arabs living in their houses. So, like, it's a powder keg waiting to explode. And the PUK are trying to enact a degree of order. The U.S. command at CENTCOM doesn't really understand the situation and is being somewhat influenced by the Turkish government.
Yes,
the same guys that didn't let us fly through their airspace, telling the U.S. command that the Kurds are committing atrocities. So CENTCOM tells us all Kurds must get out of the city, and we're like, that's the kind of stuff we're almost like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, with what resources? We got 70 Americans. I'm going to kick hundreds of people out. Like, what?
They're kind of we're doing the best we can to accommodate some of this stuff, and some of it we're just not doing. 24 hours after we took the city, I had to go back to the outskirts of the city to escort the 173rd Airborne Brigade to the airfield. So they did finally join us. Again, I'm not trying to throw too many stones, but I'm just the way it is. Once we got them to the airfield, they refused to leave the airfield for about 8 days. Like, we couldn't get them to go on patrol with us for about 8 days. Because their position was, we're not going to go on patrol until we've secured the perimeter of the airfield. And I'm like, okay, it's not really helpful. There was a couple other pieces like this, like when crowds, after about 24 hours, people started to get, any population would do this, they started to get frustrated, and they just wanted to know what is going on, what are the rules, and we couldn't tell them those rules. And as one crowd, there was like not a riot, but it was getting a little uppity. There was a guy in the crowd waving what I can only describe as a typical janitor's set of keys. Like, he's got the 500 keys on a gigantic key ring, and he's waving it. And we're like, what's that guy's deal? So we literally go out there and we talk to him. And he's like, I'm the manager of the power plant. We must go to the power plant before it gets looted. And when I say looted, you need to understand what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about stealing TVs from the department store. I'm talking about stealing bricks out of the wall. I'm talking about stealing wire out of anything that has wire in it.
Yeah.
Like, these people are so poor, or they lost their homes, they will salvage anything they can. So, like, we can refer to it as looting, but I'm like, nice new bricks are a nice thing to have. Metal is really useful. So, like, they will rip all the wiring out of the wall so they have wire, and it'll destroy the power plant. So we literally drafted a power plant with this guy, and 4 of my guys unlock the locks, go into the building. imagine like some cartoony, like old power switches, flip the switches and 75% of the power for the entire city comes back on. And I'm telling you, it's really weird to explain. When the power came back on, you could feel in the air the animosity just ended. Like, it was really interesting to explain. There was kind of, I don't like, there's a lot of ethnic tension. Arabs don't like Kurds, Kurds don't like Arabs, Turkomans are here too, and they don't like anybody. Everybody is like talking about starting to fight. Power comes back on, and everybody was just like, oh, I'm going to go watch TV. I'm going to go watch the soccer game.
Yeah. It's politics though. It's like, tensions rise, give them something.
I said this for years. People in the third world are no more or less violent than we are. We just have a lot of really cool stuff that I'm not willing to risk. Like, this is a really awkward way to say, but like, we dislike our neighbors as much as anybody else, but we just don't have piles of guns laying around the streets. And I've got a cool job and I got tons of neat stuff in my house that I want to keep. If you take all of that stuff away, suddenly the animosity you have to your neighbor is easier to fuel into actual violence. Yeah. So electricity just came back on, power comes back on, water is now pumping in the pipes. This is massive. And that's why Kirkuk was largely handed over as not only the first city in the north seized, but it was in very, very good condition. At this same time, we were still communicating with Iraqi elements, and literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these Iraqi officers I talked about fled their positions and got on the road out of the backside of the city to the city of Tikrit. And we knew this. We were getting all the intercepts again that, like the intercepts saying things like, are we doing this for real? Is this happening tonight? Is this really going to happen? So we knew there was a large contingent. We were communicating with these guys to that marketing campaign again is, please bring your guys back in. Please. We were using the word capitulate, not surrender, because it sounds weird to say, but like legally, capitulate allows them to stay in the Iraqi army. If they surrender, they have to, they basically have to go to a prison camp and they are not in the army. We were trying to make a point that, hey, if you are a colonel in the Iraqi army today, we want you to be a colonel in the Iraqi army tomorrow, and we were doing a good job brokering that agreement. And then all of a sudden, another edict came down from on high at the Pentagon that said that is no longer an option. The only option now is surrender or die. And, I could joke about this and say, I'm not sure if they finally misunderstood the guidance I gave them a month ago about their surrender message.
Yeah.
So maybe my fingerprints are on this too. But this is very painful to talk about, actually, because like we are now we were in communication through our Kurds, mostly on cell phones, with, this is General Khalil. He has 5,000 fighters. He wants to bring his men in. And like, this is where we're more similar than different. They're military guys, just like we are. They want to get past this. They want to have a life for their families. They want to have a job. And they actually, in some cases, want to take care of their men. So they're asking us, can you assure me that we're not going to go to a prison camp? Can you assure me we're not going to be pulled away from our families? And up to now, my answer has been yes. And now suddenly I'm getting a message from the Pentagon that no, it's surrender or die. And to which we myself and my CIA counterparts, we communicated back to higher, I'm talking to these guys long distance. Like, they're not in front of me.
Yeah.
So when I say the only options are surrender or die, they're like, I choose neither. And there was one conversation through an interpreter on a telephone with one of my Kurdish counterparts where, when I explained this option, the guy on the other end, the Iraqi officer on the other end, said, do you understand what this means? And I said, I do. And I don't remember who said it first. I feel like maybe I did, but I said, I'm very sorry about this. And bottom line is, he said the same thing. He said, this is not what I want. I'm very sorry about this. And both of us said something to the effect of, he said it first, the next time we meet, it will not be as friends. And I said, I understand that. And that's where he said, I don't want this to happen. I'm like, I understand that too. And he said it, I said it. We both said, like in Arabic, peace upon your family. I wish good things for you in the future. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, we both said, this is the last time.
When you read this part in the book, it's actually pretty sad. like the way you guys have been building these relationships.
It makes me sad to talk about it now, actually.
Yeah, and like
Uh,
the capitulation stuff. So it said you'd been brokering this with the Iraqi commander. This was like over a certain period of time, and you're like, okay, like do we need to keep doing killing here? And we're doing something on the ground, but command way way away has totally different plans, and you're like, you know, stuff's working here. Like, why aren't we doing this? So it's just like this crazy clash of
yeah.
seeing stuff from the front line versus the person in the ivory tower.
And here we are talking, and it was very clear in this conversation, we are not enemies, and we're going to be able to talk like two professionals and wish each other and our families well, and acknowledge, I regret what is about to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Peace be with you, my friend. And like and the phone call ended. I swear to God, and I was, I can't believe it's been like 22 years because I'm still choked up about it. I was in tears when the phone call ended because I was like, I don't believe what we just did. So we pushed all of these professional military members to really go into hiding and have no choice but to choose the insurgency.
Yeah.
And like the deal was going to be, if these guys are in the Iraqi army with me tomorrow, they're going to be the ones who are going to tell me that guy's a troublemaker, that guy's an insurgent, that guy, which I am 100% convinced would have been a very small percentage of the population. Because you got to understand also at this point, it's not until about 6 months from now that foreign fighters start to flow into Iraq. Mm-hmm. This is an Iraqi problem today. So like if the bulk or large percentages of the Iraqi army had joined my side, they would have been able to stabilize things and tell me who's not on board and who's trying to cause problems.
I think the closest equivalent I might have to something like this is when handling informants, and when you have certain things you're trying to build a relationship. It could be over months or years, and then they get into something, right? And command or whoever, the bosses are like, hey, we're going to handle it this way. And you're like, this guy's been gold for us. Maybe we should do it a different way, and let me, what I've been working on, like we could handle it a different way. We could bring people to our side. And they're like, no, not interested. Like, that guy's a piece of shit, or he's a bad guy. Why do I care about him? And you're like, holy crap. Like, you guys are not getting the bigger picture here. So yeah, it's difficult.
It all started to turn super weird at this point because besides what I just described, I'm going to say the Pentagon generically created an element called the Free Iraqi Forces, mm-hmm. which was 100% a manufactured fake Iraqi thing. This is like a bunch of for whatever reason, they showed up and they had uniforms with a patch on the sleeve that said FF Free Iraq, the FIF, Free Iraqi Forces. They had ID cards. They all sucked. Most of them were former criminals. They never did anything useful combat-wise. Like, they were never involved in any action that was of any utility. And then we met an Army colonel, American Army colonel, and we said, what is going on here? And his point was, well, the Pentagon wanted to put an Iraqi face on things. To which I'm like, I got 50,000 fighters here that are Iraqis. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
and quickly, it makes no sense whatsoever. As the 173rd is now in Kirkuk, the 101st Airborne has now air mobiled up to Mosul, which is the city to my north. You've got these American conventional soldiers that are on the ground that don't have the fidelity of what's going on here. And they're sort of being told, hey, the Kurds are the bad guys, and we're only going to work with these Free Iraqi Forces. They're the freedom fighters that actually worked alongside of us. And this was horrifying to watch.
Yeah.
Because suddenly my Kurdish counterparts are getting stopped at checkpoints and their weapons are getting confiscated. They're getting flex cuffed. I'm spending all of my time, deconflicting or, pulling guys out of, being arrested essentially. And it was, again, we're straining the Kurdish
relationship.
The Kurdish relationship is, hey, these folks have done amazing things for us. We're as successful as we were because of them. And the U.S. military seems to have gotten an entirely wrong story out of this.
Yeah.
Oh shoot, there was something I was going to say about that I wish I just forgot it. Because it's a very complex part of this story that the U.S. didn't fully grasp what these guys had done for us. This is what I was going to mention. when I talk about this whole campaign, and I keep talking about our mission was to tie up 60% of the Iraqi army north of Baghdad. Even myself, I was not as aware of the American efforts to take Baghdad and how incredible they were. But like, if anybody's familiar with the stories of the Thunder Run, it was called, the armor and mechanized units that were approaching Baghdad made a very bold decision to not stick with the original plan of methodically taking the city block by block, but to race to the center of the city, which did cause like a morale defeat for it. Once the Iraqi population saw that they're at the palace, it's over. Everybody fell apart. But what I don't think most people appreciate, and there's a book called Thunder Run, which is very, very good, that gives an account of how harrowing that Thunder Run was. I mean, incredible fighting. And I want to make this really clear the way I say this. When the forces did reach the center of Baghdad and their objectives, they were completely culminated. You know, they were close to being out of ammunition. They were close to being out of fuel. They had been fighting continuously for days. You know, and that's unbelievably incredible and heroic. But I make the point. So what if Saddam had been able to counterattack with one division? How would it have changed the outcome of that battle?
Yeah.
You know, like, from my perspective, when I talk about this campaign, like, we did pull off our mission successfully by the skin of our teeth, timing wise. And I don't know if the American military appreciates, I don't mean to sound like for credit, like they don't appreciate what we did. That's not what I mean. I don't think they appreciate the strategy of it, of you guys assumed a degree of risk by going light and fast in the South, which was really bold, and it paid off. It only paid off by the narrowest of margins because we were successful in the North. And it could have gone catastrophically different had any of these circumstances been different.
Yeah, had they been able to send anybody else south, had they been able to, repurpose any of those teams and send them down, now you got a whole nother fight on your hands, but you got none of the ammo, all that stuff. So this was like right at Kirkuk is taken, Baghdad has fallen. Just as we kind of get into the conclusion of what you did there, do you want to talk about what came after? Because you do have a couple chapters of coming back and just some of the stuff that happened, like kind of down the line. Do you want to get into any of that?
I will real briefly, I'll just comment on that, why it's in the book.
Okay.
Because somebody that was working with me talked about, well, your book says it's about the Kurdish resistance. This is sort of outside the purview of that. But my take was, it was pertinent to understand the story. So in the book, the epilogue is essentially my return to Iraq 4 years later and what the coin fight looked like. And what I think is particularly interesting and important about that is, one, night and day environment, like, meaning the experiences that people gleaned in the invasion are entirely different than the experiences people gleaned during the counterinsurgency period. And what special forces did is also completely different mission sets. So I ended up returning 4 years later, which was really, really weird. And there's, the book gets into some of the challenges of getting back to Iraq as an officer.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to now see what the special forces teams had done was they found Iraqi counterparts over the years. Actually, if you could imagine, as Baghdad had been secured, as Kirkuk had been secured, like, so the country slowly was secured. And it also slowly started to devolve into instability over time, like about 6 months, because our stability efforts were not very conclusive. It was we were leaving a lot to for the population to be uncertain about their future. During that time period, a lot of the special forces units literally just looked around and found males who were military, police, just regular civilians, and just started developing relationships with them. It started slowly at first as, hey, we need to set up houses here to live here. You guys want to get paid as our security force. So they might pay 15 males to be a security force. That slowly then led to, do you guys want to get some training? You guys, and they over time started to build things that became counterpart units. And it's really funny because nobody directed them to do this. They just started doing it.
Yeah.
Fast forward 4 years later, we literally have 35 special forces teams in country from north to south to west. And every one of those teams has a battalion equivalent of Iraqis that are well trained and trusted. And we were to the point where we needed to start transitioning them to something formal, meaning like previously they were just like literally one ODA might have something that used to be a part of the first Iraqi division, like a company of guys they just took. We had to rename all of them and turn them into either Iraqi SWAT units, Iraqi Special Operations Forces, or there's a couple other ones that had odd names like the Hilla SWAT and the Emergency Response Unit. But we formalized them into all, they are legitimate Iraqi government forces that are all kind of named and function the same way. And I don't think people realize, like, we built a structure of 35 battalions of Iraqi forces that were really competent. I say that because when I returned, the Americans were very, very focused on what are the Americans doing? What are the Americans doing? And I even watched them brief. They never briefed the leadership on what did the Iraqi units do today, which I thought was mind-boggling because the Iraqi units were doing as much, if not more, than the American counterpart units.
Well, and you're going to leave it in their hands. So, yeah, you want them to be competent.
And they were incredibly competent. Actually, you know, if Iraq is holding their stability and security together today, it's largely due to the efforts of an organization that we called the ISAF, the Iraqi Special Operations Forces, that we built, that eventually grew into, I think, 6 battalions, and was amazing. I mean, the degree of training, and I love it because for a special forces guy, it literally just started out by, we just got to know these guys and started talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
And after we talked to them, we started training with them. Then we made them into a unit. Then we asked, you know, and I hope it comes across in the book. It's a typical special forces guy thing to say, but like I do have an affinity for the Iraqi people and the Kurdish people. I like foreign cultures. They're good people. You know, in a lot of ways, yeah, there's differences, but they're a lot like us. And they love their families. They just want to be prosperous and safe. And it's not hard. It's a shame when someone has a bad stereotype of, oh, those people in the Middle East, you know, they're just like us. So it wasn't hard in Iraq to look around and find males, in some cases females too, who are willing to risk their personal safety for the betterment of their country.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the purest, this is patriotism in the purest of senses, you know. And we had no problem finding scores of those people who did great things for us for years, trying to hold that country together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old special forces principle called training yourself out of a job.
And there's an event I know I talked about in the book in 2008, the spring of 2008, where the enemy and it's probably beyond the scope of this podcast to talk about how the enemy was a very complex issue. There was actually multiple enemy in the counterinsurgency phases of Iraq. There was one time where we were helping some operations be conducted in the south, and the enemy messed up and accused the Iraqi forces of being the 82nd Airborne. And it was beautiful. It was just too easy for us to be like, well, you got that wrong. That wasn't the American 82nd Airborne.
Yeah.
That was your military, Iraq. And that small fumble had massive ripple effects because the Iraqi public literally suddenly had something to glom onto to be proud of. Like when they saw the thing called ISAF, like it was pretty badass. I got to be honest with you. And like when we put posters out and said, this is your military. And 2007 was the beginning of it, but 2008 was really a year where things started to tip, where at least our Iraqi forces could start to go on the offense. We weren't just defending. We weren't just triaging the security situation. So like when the enemy messed up and said things like, that was the 82nd Airborne last night in downtown Basra, we put posters out and be like, nope, that was the Iraqi ISAF, and they're coming. And we would write things like, we're coming for you. Your days are numbered. Mm-hmm. And we would use the guy's name, like the enemy, which really was culturally offensive to show, you know, the corrupt mayor of, you know, town X as an insurgent. And we're like, oh no, we know you're working with Abu so-and-so. And the Iraqi people, they loved it. They needed any cultures like this. They needed something to connect to as, I'm proud of us.
Yeah.
Which speaks back to, if we had used, let's say, for example, the 82nd Airborne, there's no degree of success that we could have achieved that would be enough to get the population to be satisfied with that. Because, you know, like a low level of success conducted by them, oh my God, that's a fantastic victory. They were, because it has like a fire effect of, they're so proud of their own people. They're so proud of their own identity. Versus, yeah, the 82nd Airborne was fantastic. They did some great tactical stuff last night. What do I care? They're not us.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and that's really the story of how we succeeded, at least in the latter years of the counterinsurgency.
Man, this is an amazing story. You need to get the book out here sooner for people, but we'll, whenever it comes out, we'll take it. We're just kind of coming up to the end of the time. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I think we've gone through pretty much everything I even had notes on from reading this. Anything else that you want to make sure we talk about?
This for me was an important story to tell. And this goes back to the first thing you asked me about this is because I think there's a tremendous amount of value for the military community, special forces or not special forces. For historians, I think we're at a point. It's been long enough, but it's not too far away that we can actually start having calm conversations about, hey, what happened in Iraq? What happened in Afghanistan? And I would hate for those two events to fall away.
Yeah.
And I know doing the research for this book, even the military's own formal accounts of the Iraq War, I found grossly incomplete. So, like, my hope is that this at least contributes to a broader understanding of this is what we did, not just special forces, but we, the military. And then, lastly, if you're not covered by one of those two groups, well, I'm not a special forces guy, and I'm not a historian. I think it's just an entertaining story. That it's an adventurous story that it almost reads as unrealistic.
I would say you could, because there's so much more in the book. We did cover a lot, but if someone reads this book, you're going to be talking about like a 3-hour movie or this thing. There's so much to do, and there's a ton of action, but there's a ton of the drama. There's all the personal connections, and then, and I got to say betrayal. That wouldn't be the right word, but even the stuff within the U.S. Army, and then how some groups come in and how they treat, the native forces there that you're dealing with, and you're like, I get along with these people, but then they come in and just kind of are like, whatever, they're second class, and it was just there's so much there. It's so dynamic, and there's so much going on, and it's like I even reading the book. I'm like, well, this could have been a 500-page book. There's so much you could detail out. So I thought it was really good.
Yeah, and there's so many useful lessons that are contained with it that this is one of the ones that I'm going to be I read it and I'm going to be rereading it because it's just the things in there I as a sniper instructor I love the anecdote about guys were taking sniper fire and they just set up a 60 millimeter mortar and they blow the guy away because I've always hated that cliche of, well, the best weapon to send against a sniper is another sniper. And it's like, well, reality would have a different opinion on that. Okay. This whole thing with a sniper duel, it's like, if you got a 60 millimeter mortar, don't do this old snipers up thing that the Marines did back in Vietnam. And just the way that soliciting the Kurdish, and you touched on this before, soliciting the Kurdish commander's input as a partner
Yes.
instead of a subordinate is something that's seriously lacking from America, the American Army's approach to, dealing with allies. It was, and then I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if because you were talking about calling in the close air support earlier, and it's like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if one of the ones that struck me you guys were completely exhausted calling in coordinates, and it was just like, okay, there's 3 of us, all right, so all 3 of us, we're going to repeat the coordinates. We're all 3 of us are going to check each other because right now we're kind of punchy, and just to make sure that we don't drop bombs on our own position. This is how we're going to going to check each other when we're exhausted. And it was just like, well, yeah, that's really something that doesn't come up too often in the classroom. So much thanks for passing on stuff like that.
No, thanks, Ninja. I really do appreciate it. And I really appreciate the opportunity to kind of get this story out there also, because that's the last piece that I really hope someone takes away is if someone's just reading it because, hey, I'm interested in it, it's a good story. It may be totally different than anything you're going to experience in the future of your life. But I think that the keys are still there. We face so many seemingly unsurmountable obstacles, and we didn't judge our success on if I think I could overcome it. We just took the next problem that's in front of us.
Yeah.
In increment. And we eventually continued to work the problem. And we didn't gauge our effort based on my likelihood of success. We always just give it 100%. Let's see where it goes. Let's find an option. And I'll say again, I'm very proud to be the keeper and teller of this story for the guys who were the executors that did such a great job. And I hope that inspires people down the road when they're facing challenges.
That's awesome stuff, Mark. I really appreciative that, you sent the book ahead. We were able to read it and that you come on here and tell this story. And again, I'm a big proponent of history. So at least somebody's out there keeping some of this stuff. I appreciate the effort. We're just at the end of the time. So I want to say thank you for coming on today. Hang on for 2 seconds and we'll chat just after this.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.